Hello, and thank you very much, Richard, for inviting me here. Must keep an eye on the time. I've got 15 minutes. Basically, I'm speaking from a slightly different position. Over the last couple of days, we've seen some really impressive ideas and projects that seek to change reality by getting stuck into reality and working with the existing systems. As most of my activities happen in an academic setting, I'm quite interested in how I can make more use of that space to not just teach students and work with the next generation, but is there something specific about working in that kind of context, kind of liberated in a way from market forces, that we can use to help design contribute in other ways? So what can we do as design researchers to make a contribution to improving things? So when I look at art colleges, I see an amazing concentration of imagination. If you look at societies, they're the kind of little hotspots where it all gathers. And I think that design can harness this and act as a conduit linking the imagination of art schools with the systems outside, whether they be public forums, think tanks, policymakers. And what I want to talk about today is one very small project that Fiona Raby and myself recently did with the Design Museum. We're starting to experiment a little bit how we might go about dealing with much larger issues in a more, I guess, speculative space as designers. So I also find images like this fascinating. This is a proposal for an airport on top of some skyscrapers from the 1930s. And obviously it seems absurd to us. And I kind of hope that maybe in the future people will look back at our society and see it as equally absurd, that see that the values, just as the values behind this seem crazy to us, the values that are driving the design of our environment today may equally appear absurd. This also from the 1930s by Norman Bel Geddes is a 9-story plane for 600 people with orchestras, other planes, hangars, all sorts of things. And it's wonderful to think how did we get to economy airlines from this vision? And again, it's a massive shift in values. It's the underlying beliefs, dreams, ideals, and so on that have changed. And design, in a way, is a materialization of those dreams. And I guess I'm interested in how we can continue to evolve our values and what role design can play in materializing new values and new dreams even. So some of it's going on today. This is quite an impressive project looking at mining asteroids. I think the scale of it's fantastic, but it's not really a dream. It's driven by economic desire to maximize the financial returns beyond the Earth. And I guess I'm interested in where social dreaming can happen. And to do this, I think in our own practice, in the work of Fiona and I, we've tried to make a shift from realism to idealism. Not just idealism of believing in a better world, but also in enjoying and celebrating ideas that might appear unreal and trying to find a usefulness for them. Now, this happens in many other fields. In fine art, there's a fantastic history of it. This is a wonderful project by Charles Avery, where he visits an imaginary island and has been doing so for the last 10 years and brings back the things he finds there. Oops, this isn't working. This is, architects have hundreds of years of tradition of speculating and imagining alternatives. This book by Luigi Ceferini from the 80s documents an imaginary society in an imaginary language. So the book is completely impenetrable, but still it works on the imagination. It's extremely inspiring. And recently there's been a book series by Sternberg Press in Berlin where they've asked writers to reimagine different countries. Probably the Finnish one actually comes the closest to really looking at alternative welfare states and so on. But the Book of Scotland, for example, imagines hundreds of different kinds of Scotlands, from the sublime to the ridiculous. So I'm interested in what design can bring to this kind of space. So recently we did this project with the Design Museum where we proposed a rethink of the UK in the spirit of the Sternberg Solution series, and we called it the United Micro-Kingdoms. And we were wondering, where do you start? So we did a lot of research. We came up with these sometimes called political compasses, where ideologies are mapped and spread out. And of course, ideologies bring together different values, priorities, beliefs, and so on, and this is where we wanted to start. So this is a found diagram. It isn't one we invented. On this website, you can actually type in your answers to various questions and find out where you fit on this map. It's interesting that most Western political ideologies have been drifting up to the upper right-hand corner. And when I do this project with my students, they always end up down the bottom, somewhere around the Dalai Lama. Maybe there's something about designers and, we're opposed to the way society is going. So we set up a fairly artificial construct of 4 different zones, combining different technologies and different values or different belief systems aligned with different political ideologies. Communism and nuclear energy, digital technologies and extreme capitalism, biotechnology and social democracy, and anarchy and self-experimentation. And we very loosely mapped these onto different parts of England. We didn't try to situate them precisely, but more to say, if we're going to be thinking about biotech or self-drive cars, let's think about it through the cultural lens of the UK, as it would be very different from California or Asia, or as we've just seen, India. So we needed a medium for this, and we focused on transport. Transport because it kind of embodies the dreams of the 20th century, the kind of idea of freedom, independence, mobility. And when you drop this idea of a car into the different ideological context, those dreams distort and mutate and maybe even turn into nightmares. The car also allows us to, or the vehicle allows us to look at a one-to-one scale object, but also large infrastructures. So there are 4 different groups. I'm going to very briefly mention 2 of them. One of the things we're interested in, that when we look at architectural master plans, we see extremely extensive re-envisaging of countries, zones, whatever. We kind of can project ourselves into them. Film obviously immerses us in the imaginary worlds they present us with. And we're interested as designers if we can make little bits of these worlds, bring them into our own world, and could people kind of reverse engineer those objects and start to imagine the values of those fictional parts of England and compare them to our own. So the first are the Digitarians. They basically embraced digital technology with its kind of obsession with tracking, transparency, tagging, kind of slightly soft totalitarianism. And in this society, the citizens are also consumers. There's no difference. It's run by technocrats, maybe algorithms. Nobody really minds as long as they're still presented with choices. And the vehicle we chose is the self-drive car. And as they've been explored at the moment, they're seen in a very utopian way, that we'll take these leisurely commutes to work, relaxing, what looks like VIP zones in nightclubs. But we think it's going to be slightly different. We're kind of looking to economy airlines and the kind of values that we have in the world today. So it would be, the roads become like radio spectrum. They're leased by the government to companies. The companies then lease them to their clients, like telecoms do. And everything's determined by price, wanting a cheap price, pace, closeness to other users, priority, and privacy. And we developed a sort of a tariff that's meant to be sort of difficult to use. And the car starts to, rather than navigating space and time, the car basically becomes a computer for navigating tariff systems and markets. Each car is a sort of physical expression of this. They're more like non-sexy appliances than 20th century vehicles. So this one's space unit. You stand up to save space, can surf on the way to work. This one offers a rear-facing position, which might be a little bit cheaper. This one has 4, so it's economy, but you have to then, you can pay a little bit extra to be the first dropped off. Obviously, it's cheaper to be the last. And here you get a bit more privacy as a separate unit. And these are the final ones, a glimpse of them. They're kind of, we imagine the Digitarian world is candy-colored. It's a kind of, on the surface, it looks very friendly, but underneath it, there's some fairly sinister economic machinery going on. Just show a couple of images of how the system might work. So you'd imagine that if you have computer-controlled cars, you can really rationalize the use of the roads and make it for a really enjoyable and optimal experience. But once you take the human out of the equation, how is priority established? Which cars have to stop and which cars are allowed to go through? There must be some values behind this system. At the moment, we're told it's going to be optimization and efficiency. But I think it's probably going to be economic again. Certain people will be offered better use of this space than others based on how much they're prepared to pay. So you get the idea with that one. I'll move on. So the landscape of the Digitarians is basically just tarmac. And it's a machine landscape designed for cars. The landscape is there to basically be maximized for generating revenue and so on. There is a little bit of nature, but nobody knows what to do with it. I think the digitarians are here already. And what I'm interested in as designers, what can we do to stop this happening? So the other one I'm going to very briefly cover in 4.5 minutes are the communonuclearists. This is basically a no-growth, limited population community. So think space stations, underwater cities, that sort of thing. But we wanted to see what happened if you brought it back to England today. What could that be? It's sort of the idea that communities could have, say, small nuclear generators that would make them very autonomous. So because of that, they'd have to be mobile. Nobody else in the United Microkingdoms would want to live near them because of the danger of their energy source. So they have unlimited energy, but a limited population. So we started thinking maybe this could be some kind of gigantic vehicle or moving building, and found some very interesting historical precedents for this. The one on the right was up till recently the very biggest vehicle in existence, designed by NASA and built by NASA in the 70s for moving rockets around. We also thought, a little bit cliched at first, that this would probably be a quite oppressive environment, a totalitarian state, everybody squashed into this moving vehicle. But on the trip to America, we thought, why can't this be a little micro-utopia? Why can't it be a privileged space where these people maybe have selfishly cut themselves off from everybody else because of their nuclear energy, and perhaps there's a kind of a little internal ecosystem going on. So we started to imagine it much more as a mobile landscape. In our projects, although they're imaginary, we do try to relate them back to reality in some way and have some plausibility. So we worked with engineers to figure out what kind of scale these platforms would be. I think they're about 40 by 20 meters, 2 sets of tracks, 3 meters apart. Just to get a sense of just what kind of size we're talking about. There'll be 70 of these, so about 3 kilometers long. And I really like this quote from David Kirkby when he talks about how experts advise film directors. And the role in films is not to prevent the impossible, but to make it acceptable. And I think in the space we're working in too, where we're not hoping that these things will be realized, we're dealing much more with suspension of disbelief and people entering into the speculation with us rather than us trying to persuade them or fool them or trick them into these being real. So once we accept it's not a utopia that we're creating a blueprint for and trying to persuade people to buy into, but it's more of a tool for thinking around, a kind of interesting set of aesthetic possibilities come in too, how you signal that to people. Not that you're trying to convince them, but you're trying to play. The nuclear reactor on this chain would actually be thorium, and thorium is relatively safe, as safe as you can be in a nuclear context. And interestingly, research into it was abandoned very early on because it's difficult to extract weapons-grade byproducts from it, so it wasn't seen as a very useful form of nuclear energy. And there is research going on to it today, and I think it can be linked to some of the experiments being done with small-scale reactors for smaller communities. Some clips from the exhibition. And here it is passing through the Lake District in the UK. I think what's important for us is that we're not suggesting that as designers we come up with kind of visions on behalf of people, but that we kind of try to crystallize alternative values through design into scenarios that we can then have discussions around. So designers, I hope, and the thing I'd like to end with is, by imagining alternative ideologies and values and manifesting them through designs, can we use design as a catalyst for social dreaming? And that's the exhibition that's on in the Design Museum at the moment, if any of you are there. And I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much.